I ended up doing a lot with tracking stolen devices. I've also ended up training law enforcement on various investigative techniques, particularly around social media. I've even helped develop tools that are used for victim identification, helping to track child pornographers and tracking images and things like that. And I'll talk a little bit about how I developed those tools as well. A lot of it just out of curiosity, I started investigating these different tools, identifying unique device identifiers, and I am able to draw connections, and I'll discuss that. And then how that applies to the Internet of Things and what's emerging now and some of the concerns that I have around some of those issues. And I prefer to be called a cyber criminologist, not a hacker. I'm a little offended by that. So here are some images of people I've actually put in jail. I've blurred out the faces of the guilty. I developed laptop software that will capture photo using the web camera, get location from Wi-Fi networks, gather other information to recover stolen laptops, cell phones, cameras, USB flash devices. I also sort of created some custom Trojans for particular devices, which I'll go through as well. But what's really interesting about this is that many times, not only do we recover one device, but we end up finding a lot of other stolen devices as well. In most of the cases, probably almost half of them, we reveal firearms, drugs, identity theft, trafficking, you name it. All sorts of different crimes we're able to help unveil as a result of that. So I started out as sort of a reluctant hacker. I worked for a security company and I was very interested in USB-based Trojans. I actually started a website called usbhacks.com where I talk about a lot of the different tools that are out there that took advantage of vulnerabilities in auto run and a lot of other issues we had with Windows XP that weren't actually patched until like, what, 2 years ago, something like that still. But these, particularly malware, I was really interested in. I dug really deep, even built some of these own tools. And I didn't think there was enough awareness around it, so I created this website called USB Hacks. That was the first time the FBI contacted me. Yeah, but once they realized what the purpose of it was to raise awareness. I started developing these tools when I was working on my master's dissertation, and I decided there's got to be a way to take this technology and use it for good. What if we could actually sort of scale down sort of the nefarious actions that some of these applications took? You don't have to necessarily put a backdoor into the system, but what if you collected just enough information to help recover a stolen device? And that's what I built. And as a result, I had started a company. It was called Gadget Track. And basically, that's what we started with this flash drive. It was a free product we gave out there. And it was free because I wanted to see how many devices it worked with. And I found that it didn't just work with USB devices, it also worked with external hard drives, digital cameras, even GPS devices. Because at the time, if you wanted to download your maps, you had to plug it in USB, and it just basically it's a big flash drive just hooked up. So I found all these different devices that it worked with. And then, shortly thereafter, I was able to actually start working with some of our customers and actually recovering devices. I had one customer, that first customer, I called my first hunt. He had a flash drive that was stolen. He was a professor at university. He had a lot of research information that was on that flash drive, and he wanted it back. We're able to identify that flash drive connected to a computer lab in the University of North Texas. And it was a particular computer lab. We were able to get a timestamp. We worked with the IT department there, so we were able to identify specifically what computer lab that was. But we still had an issue. We had IP address, we had general information, but nothing very specific. And so we started digging deeper, and we found, well, actually, to get into that computer lab requires a student ID card, right? And so can we get access to those logs? And they were able to correlate the logs, and they were able to identify who was in that room. It's still not enough, right? We have to identify specifically, who had access to that one room, and we need to be able to actually see their face, because sometimes a student, maybe they borrow each other's cards, right? That can be their defense. Well, about a year before, they had a bunch of computers that were stolen out of that lab, so we got lucky. So we had some video footage as well. So as people swiped their cards, we had video footage of them as they went into that room. And actually, it's really interesting is that many of the camera systems actually have log files. So actually doing log correlation with different events, if you need to do that like a rapid or make it automatic, it's pretty easy to actually do. And we ended up busting the kid, and we got the flash drive back to the customer. Then I was actually contacted by a manufacturer of very high-end thermal imaging devices. These devices cost anywhere between $3,000 to $300,000. And not only that, they also have issues with these devices for export controls. They're not allowed to be in certain countries, and they were having issues with some of their partners who were doing the distribution, selling this to countries they should not supposed to. So basically, the malware would sit on the flash drive. We had to customize it so that even if we tried to remove the flash drive and put a new one in, it would rewrite it from the firmware. We would rewrite this my particular application to the memory card. You insert that or connect the camera to a device, and it will automatically phone home. And they couldn't talk too much about some of the cases, but they did say that it helped identify specifically one supplier. We were able to pass enough unique device identifiers to specifically map that to a particular reseller. So, and these devices were turning up in Iran. So, you know, I got really interested in this and just the ability to sort of draw connections between devices. I find that just even the smallest piece of information can actually unveil quite a bit of information if you sort of look at what else to connect to, right? Sometimes we have all this information that's out there, and it's just a matter of that one missing connection. And I did a lot of research, and I really like this guy. His name's Edmund Lacard. He is sort of the grandfather of forensic science. Of course, he was dealing mostly with physical crimes. And he had this concept that it's Lacard's exchange principle, that every contact leaves a trace. And the idea is that when a crime is committed, the perpetrator leaves something behind and he takes something with him, right? So there's always pieces of evidence. It's just a matter of where we look. And in many ways, he was actually, this is before we had DNA evidence. This is before he sort of got into the fingerprints. He was doing a lot of footprints and things like that. And there's a lot of really interesting stories that he has. But I was thinking, you know, this actually does apply to the digital world as well. And many times it's just that we don't maybe have the technology right now, or we don't have, we're not sure where to look for that piece of information. And I'll talk about some cases. So we talk about the interaction of things. I like to classify my data in a few different ways. So, you know, there's data that we create. There's something that's conscious. It's emails that we create, contact and tweets. It's information that we're publicly aware of, that we're creating, that we're putting out there. And then there's information that's created for us. So this is information when we interact with a website, it sends information back to us. And with that, there's a lot of other data that we may not see, that we're not aware of, that gets logged onto those systems. And that's where we get into the data that's created about us, right? So there's a lot of information that gets out there, and it may be something that's aggregated from this information as we interact with these devices, these screens. There's sort of this data exhaust as a result of that. And then we have what I like to call shadow data. So this can be log data. It can be pieces of information that exist inside through the whole process that we may not even be consciously aware of. And the people that actually build the systems and devices may not be fully aware that this information is out there and that it can actually reveal information about us and our activities as well. So when we look at this, when we look at a pyramid of data volume, this is a recent study. EMC found that, you know, there's, right now it's about 4.4 zettabytes, and I had to put the number, that's 4.4 trillion gigabytes. I had to look it up, zettabytes. That's what we're into right now. It's crazy. So by 2013, and that's supposed to increase tenfold. And so you actually see is that the information that we create and interact with and that's visible is very, very small compared to the amount of information that we actually generate. So when we send an SMS message, right, to someone we love, that's it, just the SMS and then the other person sees it, right? Right? Wrong. There are over 20 log files that get generated for every single SMS message that you send, right? So then you have to wonder, you know, does the NSA really need to intercept my SMS message? What if they had access to, you know, just one of those servers that was collecting that log information, right? So you have to think about, where does our data live? So when I look at information, so we have all these little pieces of information. Social security number, sure, that identifies who we are. An IP address, that's another little piece of information. We get a device ID, right? Alone, that doesn't tell us a whole lot. But as we start looking at all these different pieces of information, we start to see a profile. We draw those connections and we correlate that information, and now we have a very rich profile, and we can actually identify an individual. And the data actually gets generated from a multitude of different devices. And those devices are now interacting with other devices, right? When I connect a USB flash drive to a computer, there's a log that gets generated. There's a serial number that gets logged, and that's information I can extract. So as our devices interact with each other, they're sharing information about us. The machines are winning. So if we look at our devices as snitches, so when I started developing tools, I actually built a laptop product that would actually utilize a web camera, would actually get location from Wi-Fi networks. At the time, I was trying to figure out how do I get location, and then the first iPhone came out, and I'm like, that's amazing, it doesn't have GPS, how does it do it? So I dug deeper and I found it was Wi-Fi geolocation, reached out to the company that was actually providing that technology and said, if we do this for laptops, and sure, you want to help us debug the API for that? And they said, yeah, that'd be great. And so this is actually the first application where we were actually able to combine all that information. So, it wasn't the first time a web camera had been used for theft recovery tools, but it is the first time that a Wi-Fi location, camera, and other information, including network data, was gathered. So this was the first recovery I had. It was in Brooklyn. It was an iMac that was stolen. You see here, there's a lot of other equipment that's in the background. We gave this to the police, and he couldn't believe that this was the case. I even told him, like, the IP address, we have location, and he's like, hey, this isn't enough. If I go to this location, how accurate is it? Trust me, just take the picture, go to that location, ask around if anyone's seen this guy. And he's like, don't tell me how to do my job, all right? So he did it, and what do you know, right? They go in there, and this was a tattoo shop, and this is the back, this is the owner. And in the back, you'll see all this other stolen equipment. Not only did they recover that iMac, they also found 3 laptops for different cases. And now that cop's a good friend of mine. He's like, hey, next time you're going to go watch a baseball game or something together. So it's pretty cool. So we talked a little bit about Wi-Fi, right? So, imagine, like, back in the day we had Wi-Fi. We never imagined that could be used to locate us, right? When we first started talking about Wi-Fi hotspots, now it's pretty common knowledge. Yeah, we know that can be used to track us, and, people are doing it commercially. So as that technology evolved, then it became intrusive in our privacy. So another case I had, there was a bunch of schools were getting robbed in Portland, Oregon, where I'm from. And I actually donated some of my software to schools because they were getting hit repeatedly. It was the weirdest thing. They would get busted, they go buy new Macs, and then they get stolen again the week later. Like, what the hell, right? So we set up some bait laptops that weren't even locked up in cabinets. We had 6 of them. We just set them out on top. And sure enough, a week later, we started getting connections. Started getting information back. Those devices were stolen. And we got these interesting photos. And again, we ran into some issues because geolocation is not 100% accurate. The police, they expect me to do everything, I guess. But they went to there, and they went to the house, and it was a duplex. And they went to one side of it, and the cop actually knew the guy. It's the guy that worked on his roof. He's like, there's no way that this is the guy. And I'm like, no, trust me, I know. So I got pissed off, and I drove out there. It was in Vancouver, Washington. And I'm sitting there, and I'm getting a readout of all the different Wi-Fi signals in the area. And out walks this guy from his house, this photo of the guy we have, and a little scary. And I'm just sitting there like, oh shit, like I'm looking for directions on my computer, right? I got my antenna. Then I called the cops, and they came out there, the detective, and I talked to him for a while, and he goes, yeah, it's a good thing they didn't catch you because this guy's okay, but his friend that lives across the street, he's bad news. He was in for assault, and he's a huge, big guy. But anyway, but it was another recovery. And this one, we actually, they didn't actually tell them our software was involved. There was like 6 or 7 different guys that were involved in this crime ring, and they got them to think that they'd all turn each other in. So it was pretty awesome. I love this part of my job. It's great. We had another one where it was weird. It was a laptop that was stolen in Oregon, and then we tracked it all the way to Missouri. I was getting frustrated because it was about 2 weeks, and I wasn't getting any connection. I'm like, oh man, they reformatted the hard drive, or our software's not working. What's going on? And then we started getting tons of connections from this guy, Victor. He was nice enough to change the username on the computer to his full name, which was nice. Really great of him. So that allowed me to do some more research on him. I found his MySpace profile. He's a big Scion nut, and he actually has a lot of usernames in different Scion groups, which was nice because he had his car there, which was great because it had his license plate number, which was really convenient. He's also a big seller on eBay, where he was selling various car parts. Then he decided to sell the laptop to his friend Omar, along with a bike. But the police got involved with this one. We had enough information on them. The district attorney actually said even if he didn't have the laptop, it's enough to bust him for stolen property. So for us, that was sort of the first type of case like this, where even if he didn't have possession of the laptop, he still can get busted. What happened with this was that the laptop was actually given, it was by his father. There was another theft ring. They would actually take a bunch of stolen property, put it into a van, drive it to, these are sort of a Russian organized crime group. There's a commune down in Missouri. They would drive it down there. Because where's the first place you're going to look for your laptop when it's stolen? Craigslist or local, right? You would never think to go look on Craigslist in Missouri. Then they would load that up with stolen property from there, and they would ship it up to Portland. So another ring that we ended up busting up just because of simple software and tracking IDs. So I'm not sure. I'm going to put my microphone up to here so you guys can hear this. Then I decided to get into mobile because I get bored. You hear that okay? No. Is that better? All right.
Police and investigators on the trail of swiped cell phones. He's live outside the Washington Square Mall where the theft took place.
Can't hear that at all.
Yeah.
So my software got installed on, it was Sprint stores. They actually installed our software in their demo units. So we got the closed caption video. These are the guys that came in to cut the cables and they were stealing the phones. A few years ago. And we even got a trip permit in the back window. Yeah, so you see that they took photos of themselves, and there's a lot of other information that we got from this case. Yeah, and then two of the phones, there were two of them. One of them was that one residence, and then this one, this ended up being a house of tweakers, which we have a lot of in Portland apparently. So they were able to look at the records, and so the police were involved in this one again. Again, we broke up about half a dozen people were arrested, and not only did, and actually one of the guys he was wanted on a warrant for something else, and they also recovered a stolen vehicle, not the one they were driving, but they actually were recovering another one. So the hard part about this case was that they, for some reason, the GPS was actually disabled on the devices. But for some reason, the camera on one of them was still putting the GPS coordinates in the photos. And then we actually encrypt those photos and upload them into the cloud. So we're able to still get the location for those devices. And so that led me to some more research. And I was really interested when we were doing the encryption of the images is the amount of information that's actually embedded. You guys are all familiar with EXIF data. So information that gets embedded in it, tells you when it was taken, GPS coordinates, and a timestamp. And one thing I also found was that in really high-end digital cameras, it actually embeds the serial number and the make and model of the camera. So this got me thinking about other applications. How can we make use of that? And I ended up building another tool. There was really no way to search for those serial numbers. So I built this I was advising another startup that was sort of doing like a SETI at home type of thing where they had like thousands of computers and you would sort of lease out your computers that were unused, like in the computer lab in schools, and let it run some processes, right? So I wrote a little script that would actually go out and go out and index Flickr, all of Flickr. So it actually went and scanned every single one of their images and extracted all the serial numbers and basically created a search engine for serial numbers for cameras. So the idea here is that if someone stole your high-end camera, and then you see, a month later that a photo gets posted in Flickr, and you can map that to a username, I have this theory that we'd be able to catch a crook. It was just more of an experiment, something we put out there for free, and it actually works. So a little more how this kind of works. So we ended up creating this bot. It grabs data uploaded, serial number, the make and model, the URL, which we're able to get username from too. Store that into this mega database, and then you can do a search on your camera, and it'll return back any results. Also found that not only did we do Flickr, but there was another one called 500 Pics, which is a professional photographer website, able to extract the same data from Panorama, TwitPic, and Twitter. Although Twitter actually, they would scrub EXIF data from images you upload, I found that the profile photos, they weren't. It would be the weirdest thing. You'd have these tiny little icons, and there would be just tons and tons of this data, EXIF data that was embedded in the image. So we can get GPS coordinates, serial number, all kinds of other information. I think they've since scrubbed that, hopefully. If not, sorry, Twitter. It was here in LA, a professional photographer named John Heller. He had a camera stolen. He did a search. It was about a year before, and he was able to get a hit. Found some images were uploaded to Flickr about 3 months after it was stolen. We're talking it was between $6,000 to $9,000 worth of camera equipment. And then we're able to trace that to a Facebook profile where it was another professional photographer, and he had a photo of all this professional photo equipment. Photos of photo stuff, kind of meta, sorry. So we got the police involved. So what happened was that he was at the Egyptian theater, he was talking to someone, turned around, his gear was gone. This thief had taken it, and then he sold the gear on Craigslist. The guy that bought it from him on Craigslist ended up selling it later on eBay. So the guy that actually ended up having it and had to give it up, he wasn't a criminal at all, but he did have to get a lawyer. And so they were able to recover that device. What's cool is that they went to the guy that had it on Craigslist originally. He was still in the same apartment they went in, and there was all kinds of other stolen equipment there before. So when I talked about pieces of information, right, when we talk about Edmund Lacard, so there are traces there. It's just not necessarily we don't know where to look. Or new technology might evolve that will allow us to do that sort of that tracing, right? So it's only a matter of time. So what's cool about this is that a lot of camera thieves are now on notice that hey, some crime, something I steal today, that could come back to me 2 to 3 years later. Ended up doing a lot more with this. Had another guy that was in Virginia. He was moving to California. He was selling this high-end camera on Craigslist in the garage, and someone. They came and they punched him in the face, took the camera, and they ran off. We were able to trace that to one particular guy. We were able to get his name, his business. He was a professional photographer. I won't go into that too much. And the DJ. I was able to get his address from the domain registration for his business. Got his cell phone number, which he posted as well. I was able to get into all of his social media accounts. Ended up writing some scripts that actually goes out through TwitPic and everything and would extract any serial numbers, any GPS coordinates I could possibly find. Ended up getting a lot of photos. This guy was not very bright, so he liked to take pictures of weed, his friends smoking weed, posing with an unlicensed firearm, and smoking weed, driving down the freeway, doing 120 miles an hour with his girlfriend. Cool thing is we have geolocation and timestamps, so we're basically, felony here, felony here. It's pretty awesome. So privacy and security tips. So one thing I found is, the best way to secure your customers' data is just don't collect it or store it. Especially nowadays, we don't know what can be used against you, right? Especially all these new devices that are coming on board, all the log data that gets generated. Really, I found when you're building applications, what do you really need to store? And throw everything else away. Don't store it at all. If you're dealing with images, a good example is strip out any of the EXIF data. If you do use it, anything, make sure it's just like something that's not critical. Maybe just the dimensions or color profiles, stuff that's important to a photographer. Most people aren't going to care about that. If you do store data, encrypt as much data as you can. We actually built a backup service with our mobile application, And I was very paranoid about being compromised. You know, what if we back up people's photos and contacts and we get hacked? Man, that's a big issue. You know, I didn't trust my own ability to secure our servers, and I've been in security for so long. I'm like, man, one vulnerability and I'm toast. My business is toast, and more importantly, our customers' privacy is compromised. There's a lot of other companies out there that don't have these forms, right? They upload, you know, if you can view that image in their interface, it's not encrypted. So I actually built a tool where they would enter the privacy key in the application. It would encrypt the image and data before it gets uploaded to our server. So that way, even if you know, that server gets hacked or some three-letter agency comes to me and they want your information, I can say, yes, here's the information. It's a big encrypted blob. They have to go to you to get that encryption key. And that also relieves me of some liability on the legal side because I don't want to go to Guantanamo Bay. So, you know, then it just happened to be that maybe I saw it in the future here when we started seeing some of these new photos that were happening, right? You know, people were saying the phones were hacked. Actually, I looked at the AppSec data in those images for research, only research. And the point of compromise was it was an email, right? You know, Chris Cheney, he got busted for it. He wasn't very smart. He was able to guess passwords, but he wasn't smart enough to not get caught. He's doing 10 years in prison. And then we saw another case of that with Jennifer Lawrence and others. I think it was called, what, the Fapping, something like that, right? Where they were able to compromise iCloud backups, right? If you think about backups, there's images, there's also a lot of other information that's embedded and that can be used against people. Again, it was bad passwords, no two-factor authentication, download backups and brute force them. You know, is this Apple's fault or the victim's fault? And I think it's a shared responsibility. You know, I think the fact that Apple, you know, did a little bit more to help secure those backups, and that's a good thing. But we also need to be cautious about what information we are backing up in the first place, right? I don't think people are aware of the fact that when they do take photos, that it's not just on their device anymore, it's spread out everywhere. And there's all different places that can be intercepted, where it can be stored, where it can be hijacked. Another good example would be the snapping, which with Snapchat, where, yeah, sure, they say it's privacy safe, but there was a very insecure API, and they're still able to store some of this information on an Apache server, and that got compromised. And this is really messed up too, because it's kids' images, right? So this is very irresponsible, I think. So just be careful, and when you're building applications, even a lot of applications or hardware that says that they're 100% secure, they're not. You guys know about Black Phone? You guys hear what happened today? Yeah, there was a little bit of a vulnerability in just a simple SMS tweet, and you were able to compromise a vulnerability. So be really cautious about that. Whenever I hear someone say that our application is 100% secure, I always think of the Titanic. Protecting mobile device data. So check all third-party libraries or services used for privacy or data leaks. So maybe you're doing the right things, but if you're using a third-party service, they may not. Especially when you're looking at advertising networks, if that's your road to monetization, it might be a good idea to audit that and see what happens, where it's sending your customers' data. I'm helping with a project it's called spyware.b. It's an Android application. It's going to be launched here in about a week or so. It's going to be free. You can actually sign up for a beta if you like. We'll notify you. It might be cool if you're a mobile app developer to actually run your app through this. But it's spyware.be. And even with the development of this application, there were some privacy issues, right? Because they wanted a map. But if you actually look at Google Maps, if you want to integrate that into your application, the permissions in a request we found were it was a little overreaching. So it took a little bit of extra development to actually build off their own mapping here. The idea here is that nothing on this application comes home. So nothing that runs on that application will send data out to a third party or to the other company. So you can actually run our app, you know, to monitor the app, which is kind of bad again, sorry. But it's not going to send any information out. It's not going to leak any data. And what's great about this is it'll tell you, if there's been a GPS check-in by a particular application, what IP addresses are, app data is being sent to, how big is that data packet. And the idea here is to make this very consumer-friendly as well. And in many ways, what we're doing here is actually telling on app developers. So you're on notice if you're doing things that are invasive to other people, their privacy on the mobile side. This is going to get you at some point. Let's hope. And that's it. You guys have any questions? I'm not sure how much time we got. 20 minutes? Wow, that's record time. Jeez. Did I talk fast? Sorry. Any questions? You guys are quiet. Or you guys want to go drink, don't you? All right. Well, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good job.